in the world. So Gareth has now worked with at least 50 players on the LPGA Tour, but he also will slot in one-off lessons as his calendar allows, and he even continues to instruct RiverBend members, which we all appreciate. And if he isn't already busy enough, he's spreading his wings further, having recently introduced a line of training tools in partnership with 2 prominent Canadian companies. And these training aids are aimed at players of all levels. And all of this is in addition to his life as a husband and father of a growing family with 3 sons. So Gareth, we offer our congratulations on all your success. You've made RiverBenders very proud to call you our own. And I want to thank you in advance for spending some time with us today. We're looking forward to learning more. So the virtual floor is now yours, Gareth, and I'll turn it over to you. And we need to unmute Gareth.
Am I good now?
You are good.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that intro. I need to pay all those people I bribed so much to write all those things about me a little bit more, because it actually sounds pretty good. No, I really appreciate everybody stopping in today. We got 75 people on this call, so thank you very much. I'm excited to share some of my stories and a little insight from my tour experiences. So I'm going to try to share my screen here and kick it off. That's all good there, Simon? You can see that okay? Okay, perfect. So obviously some great content there you shared about me. I'm going to kind of go over some of that as well, but a little bit about some of my experiences on tour. So obviously it's now up to 65 players on the LPGA Tour that I have worked with, 16 different countries that I have managed to coach people in. A number of different languages. So I haven't managed to learn their language. They've always been the one that's come to me and actually picked up. So it's a bit of Irish Canadian Thai or Irish Canadian South Korean, or it's a bit of a mix. So sometimes we just nod, and that's just about as much as the communications go. But it's extremely interesting working with so many different cultures and so many different people. And I think it wouldn't be, I wouldn't have had the success that I've had on tour without the help of RiverBend. So this is my 10th year at RiverBend. I've given thousands of lessons there, and I've worked with, probably a lot of you guys on this call. And a lot of people say to me, how did you manage to get on tour? That's a big jump. And I put it down to basically all the experience. So even if I was helping a 30 handicapper or helping a scratch player, those experiences, those times where you're just trying to help someone, manage first tee nerves or make a putt or manage playing in ladies league, all those little things just kind of build and build and build until you get to sort of a higher level, and then you get to that tour level. So it's really interesting. Somebody also says, what's the difference between teaching a tour player and an average golfer? The truth is nothing apart from skill level. They're exactly the same. People are people. And what we're trying to do to really get the most out of everybody is to make that connection. The better the connection with the player, the better we can actually instruct, because there's lots of great information and everybody can watch YouTube. And I'm sure that over this time, everybody has been watching YouTube and looking at all these different things. And you're probably a lot more confused than you are with answers. So the key is that finding someone that you can relate to. So I have to thank everybody who has taken lessons off me, because it has been the work with you guys that has allowed me to move forward in my career. So most people, obviously at RiverBend, I teach everything. Like I don't specialize, or I don't, I don't sort of not teach full swing. And even on the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour, I teach both of them. But I suppose when I started RiverBend, I kind of noticed that there was a big gap in the market, meaning that I think Foley was still at Glen Abbey at the time, and there was a lot of great instructors, but everybody only taught the full swing. So for me, to get myself noticed, I decided to go into the short game, and there was nobody doing it at the time. So if I was going to stand out as an instructor, I needed to separate myself, and that meant researching, reading books, taking lessons off anybody who I could to sort of elevate my skill level above anybody else's. So the more you do that and the more and more lessons you give and the more short game work you do, you can actually start to see some big differences. So the other reason I think I gravitated to the short game was obviously growing up in Ireland. As you can see from this display, you're not usually on the green very often. You're usually on some of these slopes or runoffs or humps and bumps and all. So we really get to use our imagination. We really can be creative when we chip and around the greens. And if anybody on this call, I know there's a few people who've been to Ireland with me when we went a few years ago, know that you can hit a putter, you can hit a hybrid, you can hit a 7-iron, you can hit lob wedge, pitching wedge. There's so many different options. So for me, I was fascinated with the short game because it's just not one way. I think it was interesting when I came from Ireland to Canada. The one thing I could do, I could hit my pitching wedge about 10 feet off the ground. And I remember playing with a couple of Canadians one day and they said, "What's wrong with your pitching wedge?" And I said, "Nothing. Why?" He goes, "It doesn't go in the air." I says, "Yeah, that's because I lived in Ireland. We had to keep it under the wind so much just so we could get it to go forward. Otherwise it's going to blow around." So it was interesting when I came to Canada, I had to learn how to hit the ball high. I had no idea how to do it. All I knew how to do was sort of bump it low along the ground. But all of these experiences sort of cultivate into me deciding that I wanted to get into short game and really, really sort of set myself apart if I could, in that way. So obviously, one guy I idolized was Sevi. Sevi was an amazing Spaniard. Like obviously, if you don't know much about Sevi, he's got some really cool short game videos, and they're actually from, I think they're from the 80s, early 80s in Dubai, and they're about an hour long on YouTube. And he talks about how he plays all these short game shots, and it's just fascinating. And when they were introducing the lob wedge years ago, Sevi was one of the guys that was like, "No, no, no, no lob wedge, no lob wedge, too easy, too easy." And he was fighting the tour to say no lob wedge because he could hit any shot around the green with even with a 9-iron. Like, so he was able to lob shots with a 9-iron where guys really needed that 60, and obviously now with Phil Nicholson using 62s and 64s. So Sevi was that creative that he could almost do anything. So having these experiences, obviously growing in Ireland, watching these, idolizing these people, it made sense for me to concentrate on the short game. And that's kind of what I did from there. So my first kind of break on the tour was with a girl called Jane Park. Jane is originally from California, but she lives now in Atlanta. She, as Catherine was saying, so when I started with her, she was doing okay on tour, but that next year she doubled her money. So I kind of got instant feedback from all the other players on tour just because they seen what we were able to do right away. Interesting thing with Jane, it was actually at the London Hunt Club that we actually met. She was coming to Canada, and a mutual friend of ours said, "Hey, there's somebody up there in Canada that's doing some great stuff. You should come and take a lesson with them." And that's how it ended up happening. She came up, and I met her at the Hunt Club, did some work with her, and yeah, so it was interesting because I think all of my focus at that time has been really chasing the PGA Tour. Everybody, as a coach, I think we aspire to being on the PGA Tour. Obviously, it just gets more TV time, it gets more coverage, and I never really ever thought about working with the LPGA. It just obviously I would have loved to have had the opportunity, but it never really came into my mind to do that there. So it was really exciting to work with Jane. And then I started working with her friend Tiffany. Tiffany had the same thing. She doubled her money on tour next year. And then I started working with Moria Jutanagarn. And then I think the last 3 years, Moria hasn't earned less than about $1 million a year on tour. So she's had a tremendous. And then as soon as that happened, I picked up her sister. So Aria. So in 2016, that was the first year. January 2016, I worked with her, and Catherine was saying 66th in the world. So she was obviously a great player at that time. Like, it's not all of my doing. She has a great team around her, but it was exciting to watch the rise in her profile. She's sitting there. This is 2018. She won the CME Globe that year, and that's a box with $1 million sitting in it. So not a bad little day there for her. But in that 2016 year, she won the money title, the race to the CME, and she had 6 wins on tour, including the British Open. So we did a lot of really good things, and I'm going to kind of talk about the differences between, making that jump, and it's a very small amount. Sometimes it's half a stroke, sometimes it's a quarter of a stroke. It's kind of minimal. I'm going to show you how we kind of did that with these players. So rolling forward here, 2018, after having such a good year in 2016, she ended up making history on the LPGA Tour. She won the Rolex. The Vare Trophy is the scoring average. She won the money title, the race to the CME, which is like the FedEx Cup. She won the Annika Award for the best performance in all the majors, and also 3 wins on tour, including the US Open. So unbelievable season. Super humble player, just the nicest girl in the world. You couldn't do enough for her. But very, very excited to see that there, and really cool to be kind of a part of history on the LPGA, because nobody had really ever done that clean sweep since Annika. So fast forwarding, that was 2018. So 2019, I ended up having a player, Jin Young Ko. I had a player, Jin Young Ko. So Jin Young and I started working we did one lesson in July in LA. And she could speak no English at all. She had a translator with her. And after that first lesson, I thought, well, that's the last time I'll see her, But between trying to communicate different ideas and different shots, it just did not go well at all. She's scratching her head going, what is he saying? The translator is trying to figure out what I'm saying, and I'm trying to communicate in a way that she understands. So we did one session there. And like I said, after that, I was like, well, that's the last time I'll see her. But her agent said to me, hey, she really liked it, but she wants to wait to the end of the season. So she hired me for 2 weeks solid at the end of the year. So the CME is the last event of the year down in Naples. A number of the members actually come out and watch during that event. And so she hired me for 2 weeks solid. We worked morning to sunset every day for basically 2 weeks. And we changed a whole bunch of things with her game. So it was pretty exciting to see like an amazing change. She's obviously a very accomplished player in Korea. She'd won 10 times there, so it's not like she's a totally unknown, but she was a rookie on the LPGA, never won in the US before. And obviously she ended up having a better season than Aria did the year before, with Rolex, the Vare Trophy scoring average, and she had the lowest scoring average out of any Korean player in history. So almost beat the 69 scoring average into 68. I think she needed to have 65 on the last day of the year to get into the 68. So it's a pretty amazing level of golf. If you're thinking like every single time you play up, you're shooting 69 or better. So again, she won the money title, 2.7 million last year in earnings. They won the Rolex, and the cool thing is that she went 114 holes without a bogey, beating Tiger's record of, I believe, 112. And it was at the Canadian Open that she went bogey free. If anybody went up to watch that there at Magna this year, so it was pretty interesting. So I've been very lucky to back 2 really good horses at the right times. So luck maybe, being in the right place at the right time, but pretty crazy to have 2 kind of years like that with these players. So the big thing is when we're talking about great players, what's the biggest difference between being a good player and a great player? And as we go through this here, you'll be able to make some comparisons to your own game and things that you're thinking about as well, as in terms of improving. So scoring average, obviously a 72 scoring average, which is mostly level par, will get you 100 rank on tour, 140K in earnings. It'll probably keep your card just about. If you get lucky, you should squeak in there and keep your card. So if you take one shot off that there, you basically half your ranking. So you'll go down to the top 50 basically, and about $400,000 on the LPGA. So there's a big difference there, you know, between shooting 72 and 71. So when we have a player and we're trying to get one shot off, you know, it's a lot of money that's going to make a big difference. So I just wanted to share some of these different thoughts, these different ideas of getting better. Because obviously, if we take half a shot now into the 70 and a half, we go down even to the 21st position on tour, 650 grand. And if you get down into that 70 mark, then you're into the top 10 and you're making over $1 million bucks on tour. So Jin Young this year obviously was 69 average, ranked number one, 2.7. So I think you can see that the difference, the separator and difference here is very, very small. So to get better, you're going to have to look at something different. And the funny thing is, I think when we look at players on tour, you end up looking at them and they're like these toothbrushes. They're just toothbrushes. You couldn't pick which one's the best or which one's the worst. You're, oh, maybe I like the blue one. You know, they're very hard to separate. So, you know, the small one there could be a 69 and the big tall one could be a 72 average. So it's very hard when you're looking at the players to actually go, I know that's a better player. So for me, it was about creating better metrics that would allow me to understand players differently. Again, I think in the past, we've been so focused on the cosmetics of golf. So 4 very, very different golf swings, extremely different. You couldn't even, like, if you were looking at these at the range, there's a lot of people and a lot of coaches that would say, well, Jim Furyk, oh, I don't like that kind of move. Maybe we should fix that there. Jim Furyk's obviously made probably more money on tour in his career than nearly anybody on the planet. Dustin Johnson there with a big bowed wrist. You know, there's so many unique, and even Matt Kuchar, like very flat, like something that normal instructors wouldn't ever teach. So I think when we look and we're trying to improve golfers, we need to look past the cosmetics, because it's so easy to make a change because you don't like the look of it. And I have a lot of players that even there, and I had one yesterday that even said to me, he goes, oh, I don't like my takeaway. I gotta hit the way that looks, or I don't like the way I'm coming over the top of it. The fact is it, does it repeat? Like, if it repeats, then isn't that correct? Even if it doesn't look great, it's what we're looking for is something that actually is going to repeat and it's going to function. For me, it comes down to something where we always measure. Oh, spelling mistake. Oh, how bad is that? Sorry, guys. um, but so we use something called strokes gained. Strokes gained is basically a measure of each category within our within the golf. So we have off the tee, we have the approaches to the green, we have around the green, and we have putting. So if we want to make a change, we have to figure out where the player is. And if anybody's interested in reading a book there, the one that Mark Brody did is very interesting on stroke gain, because it basically breaks down, especially for the PGA Tour, where you rank compared to everybody else on tour. So do you need to improve on your putting or around the green or off the tee or approaches to the green? So when I'm working with all the players, what I need to do is do a full capture of all of their strokes gained and figure out what actually is wrong. Because we could go back to one of these swings, even a Matt Kuchar swing, and I'm like, God, I don't like your driver swing. It's not good at all. But then when I go and look at his off the tee record for strokes gained, he could be a top 10 stroke gain player off the tee. So for me to go ahead and make a change there would only probably end up making him a lot worse. So I think as a teacher, no matter whether I have a 30 handicap or I have a tour pro, my thing is that I want to make sure that the player gets better, and I don't want to ever make a change that makes them worse. We also have to be sure that the work that we're doing is going to make an impact, because if it's not going to make an impact, then we shouldn't be doing it. You know, if myself and even the player is not sure that the work is going to work for us, we can't do it. We just have to abandon it and move forward. But you might see those stroke gained on the PGA Tour website. So that's what they're basically talking about. They're talking about relative to the average player on that tour, are they better or worse? So you either get a plus or a negative. And then from there, we can sort of build out a plan of, do we need to improve off the tee, approaches to the green, around the green, or putting? So it's the same thing with every member here. You know, where is your strength and weaknesses? Where are the areas in your game that you think, boy, if I could just get a little bit better, maybe around the green. Like around the green, I think is a huge one. Think about if you could chip onto the green every single time without having a second chip. If you could be out of the bunker and onto the green without having a second bunker shot, if you're a little bit better, if you could turn the proximity to the hole to 12 feet versus 20 feet when you chip, that would have a massive impact on your score. So you could just even isolate one little area and decide to work on that. So the other thing that I needed to do, especially with the players, is have them understand practice and training and how do we actually get better. Like, it's something that I pretty much ask myself that almost every day when I'm researching and studying. Like how do you actually get better? Like, it's one of the questions that bugs me and frustrates me so much, because sometimes I think I have it and other times I'm nowhere near. So I've kind of broken it into three categories here. So we would spend most of the time, or nearly 99% of all golfers will spend most of the time thinking that a technical change would change their ability to play better. And while a technical change can actually be very good for you, it doesn't guarantee success. And I noticed this here, especially when I started on tour, because I'd work on players and I'd work on their games and I'd video, and it was perfect. Like, they're so easy to change with the tour pros. They can move and they can do anything you want them to do. So you can manipulate and change them into something that looks absolutely gorgeous, but when they go to out and play, they're not any better. So it just shows you that that technique part is important, but it's not the whole story. So then I started running down this rabbit hole of, well, maybe we have to isolate the skills involved in playing well. So the skills could be something as, you know, even like driving the ball, approach shots, it could be chipping, it could be bunker play, it could be putting. And then we could break it down even to more specifics. It could be from the rough, it could be hybrids from the fairway or fairway woods. You know, it could be a whole bunch of different things. And then we basically had players practice those specific skills and measure, you know, even if it's just a grading system that they use from 0 to 5. Hey, I think my fairway wood shots are a 3 out of 5. I'd like to try to make that a 4 out of 5. Every time I go to the range, every time I go to the golf course, I'm going to work on that skill a little bit. So that actually made a big difference. So we started to see a lot better performance coming from skill-based training. So that was getting away from all the technique and just really focusing on, how do we get this shot better? Let's say I'm just trying to hit a draw, or I'm trying to hit a low shot, or I'm trying to chip over a bunker better. Those are just basic skills. If we could perform those skills better, we could actually probably score better. So then that obviously said, like I said, that made people a lot better. Then we started looking at, okay, we're still not getting everybody over the hump. Why aren't we getting the results that we're looking for? Practice is going good. They're playing good. They're hitting the shots. They're doing everything. There was one component that I forgot about, and it was the performance side of it. If we train in an environment where technique is the only thing we train, we can't expect to be free. You know, everybody says, oh, just go out and don't think about it. You'll be fine. Just pick a target and hit it. If you practice technique all the time, that's not possible. You don't know how to perform in any other way but practicing technical. Then if you go and you work on your skills, then you're just isolating skills, and sometimes you're getting false positives. You're thinking that you're actually improving, but you're not really tackling the ability to think. So I use performance as almost behavioral training. So I want players to not only have an ability to execute when they need to, but to be able to manage their behavior. So take, for example, you're going out to play with your spouse, or you're just going out to play by yourself, and you stand up in the first tee and you pipe it down there. Now, flip that over to men's day or ladies' day, and how do you feel? They're not the same. Like, standing on that first tee, there's a definite difference. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to have our thoughts collected, because the fact is that under any type of stress, it'll be very hard for us to perform, because our mind will be muddled. It'll be very difficult to get our thoughts together. And often what will happen the performance or the shot that we're trying to hit will be less than we're normally used to having. So having our thoughts written down, and my players, they write all of their thoughts down. So we basically say, this is what we're going to think about. And as they're getting up in a stressful situation, they're just running through a checklist, almost the same way a pilot would have his checklist if he was flying an aircraft. He would just go through his basic points, because you wouldn't want to leave the pilot to memory or to even past experiences. Maybe he's a bad flight beforehand or whatever. So you want to make sure that it's systematic, that it's very easy to recall, especially when we're talking about stress. So that's why I started thinking, okay, maybe I need to train the performance. So the interesting thing about performance training is that we measure everything. So if you see me at a tour event and I don't have a notepad with me, I'm working on technical or skill. If you see me with a notepad, I'm working on performance. So I write down every single shot that that person hits during performance, because I want to know how they're performing. Like, we might get a skill and it could be something simple like, okay, we're going to hit 9 putts from 4 to 9 feet, and I'm going to measure how well you do. And I write down, okay, you hold 6 of them. 1 was short, 1 was long, 1 was a misread. That would give us some framework. So build that out over, a year or 6 months. I'm gonna be able to recognize certain patterns, whether they're misreading putts, whether they're always short, whether they're always long, whether they're not starting the ball on line. All of these different things I'm going to try to figure out by measuring performance. The other thing that I want to do is simulate some type of pressure, some type of performance pressure where they actually have to perform. And I don't punish, sometimes I do, but I don't usually punish them. Like, if you don't get this right, you have to do it all over again. I basically let them, here's the goal, here's the skill, here's what we're trying to do, go. And if they don't do it, we just move on to the next thing. Because I think in golf, we punish ourselves enough that we shouldn't be trying to do that over and over again, because that's just a learned behavior. If we always teach ourselves how to punish ourselves for not performing, then obviously we're not going to be able to achieve good things when we're actually on the golf course. So like I said, I kind of had to break it down into these different categories. So that might be something like, if you're going to the range and you're saying, you know what, I got 30 minutes to hit balls. I'm going to spend 10 minutes just working on my swing or my setup. And then I really want to be able to hit that nice little fade. I'm just going to start working on hitting a nice little fade out there. And then maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 3 balls, and I have to hit all 3 balls in between this tree and this tree. That would be working into performance. So the more you break that practice down, the more it'll start to help you. You may find that you're better working, 50% technical, 25 skill, 25 performance. Other people who get in their way too much could be 10% technical, it could be 20% skill, and it could be 70% performance, just so they can get their thoughts together. So that's the sort of recipe that we're trying to figure out. Everybody's so different, there's not one way to do this, but if the players have at least a framework in place, they can start to understand how to improve their performance. So this would be something technical. So this is Jin Young Ko, and we'd be drawing lines on here and saying, hey, you're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong, and we'd like to see this. Very technical. You think if I went and said, hey, you're doing all this wrong, I don't like your hands here, you're bent over too much, I'd rather see you at 125 degrees, your eye line's outside the ball, I don't like your hands are too far in your shoulder line. Okay, go play. Good luck. You're not really going to have you're not going to have a good, that's not going to make you any better. Sure, what you've done is identified some areas you'd like to improve, but it doesn't make the golf any better. All it does is makes you think about all the things that you're doing wrong. And I'm sure many of you probably can relate to this. If you've taken video or you've hit shots, we're so critical of what we're doing. So this is technical practice here. So there's a time for it, but there's certain times during a tournament week that we would never even talk about this sort of stuff. So this is an aiming drill that I do with Jin Young. So basically I have a ruler set up here and I put a tee down. And when she's standing over the ball, what I'll do is I'll move the tee either left or right. And she goes, yep, that's good. And what we're able to do is identify if she's got good aim or bad aim for that week. Really simple, just a skill-based practice. So the first one you seen was technical. This is just a skill, basic skill of aiming. The other one we use here is just the ruler again. And what we're doing here is, this is actually at the Evian this year where she won. She's just hitting putts into the hole down the ruler. So this is working on the skill of start line. So again, this is just skill training, and she'll do this quite a lot. She'll probably spend, I'd say, 30 minutes to an hour in her hotel room doing this at night as well. So it's just something that she knows if she does the work there, it'll be transferable. So that's why, you know, shameless plug, I designed a ruler, because it worked so well for her, and it worked so well for some of the other players that the only reason I didn't like the wooden one or the other ones we're doing, because they kept warping, you know, and then she thought she was missing it, but it was the wood that actually was changing. So the one we made was plastic. But nevertheless, this is basically working on a skill. So this is skill practice. And again, worked pretty good that week. So this is performance training that we do here. So we use a couple of different apps, or I use even just a pen, a piece of paper, and I have this spider graph that we use. And basically what we're doing is we're trying to see any patterns. So I might go straight up the hill, I might go straight down the hill, I might have a right to left and a left to right. And what I'll do is I'll try to isolate maybe 10 putts or 20 putts. I'll try to isolate any patterns that we might be having. So this is all done prior to the week, because what I'm trying to figure out is what's going to happen on the golf course. Like, if something goes wrong, is it going to be technically broken down? Is it going to be skill, like she can't start the ball on line, or she can't aim it, or she hasn't got good speed? Or is there something else in there that we're not quite seeing, but when we stress her out a little bit, we might see? And sometimes she won't like me doing, she doesn't like when I do this, obviously, but sometimes I give her drills and I say, okay, you've got 10 minutes to do this drill. And I made the drill impossible to do. So the drill is, she can't do it. It's impossible to do. It's impossible in 10 minutes. But what I did was create frustration, because I'd be pushing her saying, okay, come on, we've only got 3 minutes left. We got, like, this is a simple drill. Let's get through it. You know, come on, like, stop wasting time here. And I would be pushing her to be frustrated. And what we would start to notice is, when we're looking at these patterns get significantly worse. So she might start off the first 2 or 3 minutes, and it's pretty decent, you know, the balls are collected in a nice area. As she get into 7 and 8, and I'm telling her that, come on, the other players did this in like 2 minutes, and we were done, we moved on. So again, we're just trying to stress her out, because we're trying to figure out what might go wrong. And she really hates it when we do this here, but it's really eye-opening, because it allows us to have an insight to what might happen if she gets stressed. And again, this is all performance based. So she doesn't see, by the way, this looks kind of daunting for a lot of players. This is not something that a lot of the players have access to. This is just for me. This is just for me to understand where they're maybe lacking and where they could probably improve. Because if you start showing people these graphs and these numbers and all this stuff, you know, they're going to, especially good players, the better the player, which is very interesting, the better the player, the simpler they want the information. They do not want complicated. They want, tell me what to do. Okay, why do I want to do it? Okay, perfect. Let me go forward. But so again, this is into the performance side. And then what we did was we broke it down for them. So I figured that we had to control the player's thoughts, because it's so easy, like we said, with YouTube and everything else, to go off on a tangent and start learning about this or learning about that. So these are the only things that they're allowed to think about when they're putting. So if something didn't go well, it was either aim, start line, the speed of the putt, they misread it, green reading, or how they practice and the habits they were using. So these are the only things that they were allowed to think about. So if I wasn't at a tournament and they called me, they would say, hey, Gareth, I didn't putt well today because aim, start line, speed. And then they would have corresponding drills that they would practice, or we would figure out whether they weren't able to perform that day because of something else going on. They had a fight with their boyfriend, or like, there's lots of things that, you know, can affect a player's performance. So that's what we basically do. So again, giving them a blueprint, because if you just let the player have, free will to think and plan everything, they're going to get muddled. They're not going to have a clear idea of what they're trying to work on. So again, we tried to make it very, very specific. And then here's just one for approach shots. So if we were doing approach shots, the only thing we would work on is, setup. We'd work on their balance, contact, making sure you're making solid contact, making sure the trajectory is what we want it to be. If we want to change it high or low, and making sure we've got good distance control. So you can see probably how this might differ to sometimes when you go to the range or you go to the putting green or you go to different areas when you're actually trying to improve. And a lot of times if they're going, they might only go and say, okay, I'm going to really work on my balance for 10 minutes. Or, you know what, I really like to work on my distance control for 10 minutes or whatever. So they're basically isolating skills and then only working on that and not criticizing if it goes wrong or if it goes, or getting too excited if it goes right. They're just basically doing the exercise. And basically it's like the 1% rule. If you keep doing something over and over and over again, it just keeps building and building and building and building. So the other thing that we really work hard with the players on, especially around the greens, is getting the wedges right for them. So number one thing is obviously having a set of wedges that allow you to gap well. With most manufacturers now, your pitching wedge will go so much further than your next wedge. So you end up with this huge big gap. So you want to make sure that your wedges have the right balance between them. So let's say your pitching wedge goes 100, you want your next wedge to go 90 and your next wedge to go 80. A lot of times what will happen is you'll have one wedge that'll go 100 and the next wedge only goes 70. So you have this huge gap in there. So if you get into the golf course and you have a shot that's in between there, it's going to be difficult for you to get close. So making sure that your wedges are well matched. The other thing that we did with Jin Young specifically, I'll just do putting first, was that when we did the ruler test, we noticed that the golf ball was going slightly left. So this putter, it's a ZB by Ping. If you held it on your hand like this, oh, let me see if I can grab one. It'll make it easier to show. So if you were to hold it in your hand, the toe of it would actually droop down like this. So some of your putters, you may notice that it actually sits what they call face balanced. So this is more toe hang. Okay, so sometimes it sits at even like a 45-degree angle. You can make it all different, so it can go face balanced, 30 degrees, 45, 60, and even 90. So if you're a player, and this is why we went to this putter for her, she had a slight tendency to miss left. So what we did is her putter was sort of sitting about this position here. We actually got a new putter that sat like this. What that means is that there's more weight here at the toe, so it's slower to catch up, which basically means that if you miss left, you want to have a putter that hangs down like this. If you miss right, you want to have a putter that sort of sits with the face pointing up. So instead of changing one of the best players in the world and making them match, well, making a change, we just changed the putter. And that putter took away about half a degree of rotation. So she could square the face up, and obviously she putted great with it and won 2 majors with it last year. So sometimes it's easy to think you need to make the change, but if you can just get the right equipment in your hand that matches your deficiencies or your patterns, then you can obviously make some good corrections. So that was something that we just did with her. The other thing we did is we changed her wedges. She was always playing Titleist wedges, so we actually moved over to Ping because we noticed that we got about 500 RPMs of spin. So obviously, the more spin you can create, the more you can get the ball to stop and do different things. So you'll notice those numbers. There's numbers there: 48, 8, 54, 12, 59, 13. So that's what they call bounce. So bounce is basically the opposite of digging. So the more bounce you have, the harder it is for you to basically take a big divot. The lower bounce, the easier it is. So she would have had usually in her bag a 60.04, meaning that that thing is so sharp. If you touch the ground even slightly before the ball, you're going to take a huge divot. So we changed her into a 59 degree just because of the gapping, and we added 13 degrees of bounce, which is actually quite a bit. What that did was allowed us to take very, very thin divots, sometimes not even any divot when we chipped, and it just made the contact so much better. So making sure that your wedges have the right amount of bounce for your action is probably one of the biggest things. And what we do on different turf conditions is we actually still keep the 60-04. So if we got to the British Open where it's really firm and really sandy, we would go to the 60-04 because we actually want the club to dig, not skid. So we actually change the wedges out from week to week, depending on what the sand is like and depending what the conditions are like. So again, it'd be very easy to ask a player of her caliber to just manipulate the movement and change it, but why bother? She's got a pattern already built. If I can just put a club in her hand that does all the work, then it just serves the purpose. So again, we're trying to make changes without really doing too much damage to the player. And the equipment is one of the easiest ways to do it. So this is just a little shot of her down in Florida. So you'll notice very, very square with her setup here. And just a nice little chip in there. So I think sometimes we often feel like we need to stand very open when we're chipping and pitching. So you can see this is basically just like a normal chip shot. The one thing you'll notice there is that she's gripped down the shaft quite a bit. So when you go down to start to pitch and chip, you really don't want to be gripping all the way at the top of the club because it just makes the club dig into the ground a lot more. So by going down, let me get another prop for you. Oh. So basically, so imagine that's a flat surface. So if I grip all the way at the top of the club, what's going to happen is we're going to have the toe off the ground and the heel going in. Now the heel is extremely sharp. So this club will dig, even on firm bunkers or anything, this club will absolutely dig through the surface here. So by gripping down, where she's gripping down, what it does is it changes the club. So now the club ends up being nice and flat with the surface. So it allows that club to skid through. I think a lot of people don't make the adjustment with their setup to grip down, especially when they're chipping. So I would what I used to do is I used to put marks. So on their grip here. So this might, right at the handle here, might be their chipping. And then a couple inches up might be their pitching. And then up top might be their full swing. So that was just where we figured out where the club actually ends up flat. So if we can make the club flat, it just means that she doesn't chunk them, because you can make the exact same swing, but if the club sits in this position, this edge catch, and you can absolutely duff the ball and you didn't do anything wrong except have the wrong grip position on your wedge. So just something interesting and just little tidbit I thought people might enjoy. So this is just a face-on view of her chipping. One of the things that you'll notice here is that her ball position is pretty central, maybe even a little bit more up to the left. So this is a Bermuda lie down in Naples, and she has the club sort of tilted a little bit open. I think a lot of times we were always taught to play the ball on the back of her stance and push her hands forward. And it is correct if you wanted to hit a really low chip, but for normal shots, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would say for most players now, I think it would make more sense to have your ball position sort of more up near your left foot or your lead foot here. That allows the club to sort of skid through the turf instead of taking those big, huge divots, which sometimes we do. Again, I think it's just a little setup position that I think is kind of important. And then she can deliver the club pretty nice there. Hands are slightly ahead, not much. And you can see even this, if you look closer to her foot there, there's a huge divot mark there. She absolutely laid the sod over the one just before that. And then we made a few adjustments with this one. So don't think that these players don't do that. And there's different grasses that allow for better contact and worse contact. So again, we would basically, in conditions like this, we would basically try 2 or 3 different wedges. And if we needed to bend a wedge, we'd bend it and make sure that it fit the ground surface, as opposed to her trying to adjust her body lines in her setup. Something interesting I threw in here, if you're using, and it might be a little advanced for some, but I certainly, you know, once we get back to the golf course, come and talk to me about some of this stuff, because I think it's quite interesting and a lot of people don't think about it. And it does make a big difference when you're chipping. If you use the bounce or the bottom of the club to hit, so meaning that the hands are not always ahead, so it's more flat like this here, so the shaft sort of straight up and down. If you're using that, you can hit, so these red lines basically represent inches behind the ball. So you can hit almost 4 inches behind the ball and still make contact. So it sounds pretty crazy, because I know everybody's out there and you're chipping and you're fearful and you're really trying to catch that ball absolutely perfect. If you use bounce, you can hit the ground 4 inches behind and still have a good chip. It's pretty crazy. So think about, that's the size of the hole. You can hit that far behind the ball and still make good contact. Obviously, the closer you get to the ball with this technique, the more you're going to create spin and different flights and different things. But I just thought it was interesting, because I know we are so fearful of making that good contact, and we're trying to catch ball first and then turf. It's not necessary when we're chipping. So just something to think about. So again, back to our tour stuff. If I was setting up a player to perform well, we would kind of do it in this way. So Monday would be technical work, Tuesday would be skill-based practice, and Wednesday would be performance. So think about, you're getting ready for your ladies league or your men's league, or you're just going out to play a game and you want to really play well. You want to be if you're trying to perform and play your best, you want to be in that sort of mindset just before you play on Thursday for the ladies. If I were to throw technical in here on a Wednesday, I wouldn't bet any money that they would do well. And I've done it before, where I've taught technically on Wednesday because the player was really struggling, and I just walk away going, it's a crapshoot this week. I have no idea, no clue how they're going to perform. They could play great, they could play terrible. Sometimes they do play okay, and other times they just don't play well. So if you're going to the range the day before and you're really trying to grind on your swing, don't expect to have a great performance the next day. It's probably not going to be there. You have to be able to practice in a different way that would allow you, or the best thing to do, to be honest with you, is just go play golf the day before. Don't even bother with the range. Just play golf like normal. And when you get to a day you want to play well, just go out and play. That's probably the best chance of playing well, as opposed to hitting balls and trying to work on your swing just before an event. The other thing I think is really important is getting out in the golf course and maybe hitting a few shots where you've struggled in the past, because sometimes we need to hit that shot over and over again to get over that hurdle. Obviously, I'm not saying go out in the golf course and practice, but what I'm saying is, if there's a shot that really, you've struggled with, late in the evening, jump out and hit that shot 1 or 2 times just to try to get over it. I've told people who struggled on like number 13 from time to time, okay, go out late in the evening, take 1 or 2 balls and just hit that tee shot. Do that there a few times just to get over the nerves of that shot, because it's in your head. And the more you can get out and have that situation present itself, the more you'll be able to overcome it. So I think situational practice is really huge. And this is one here just at an event where we just put the ball in a certain position and we ask her to hit a certain shot. And we'll do that there basically all the way throughout the round. We'll look at different holes. The one thing that we do, so Jin Young is 90% proficient from hitting greens from an 8-iron in. So 8-iron, 9-iron, all our wedges, she'll hit 90% of the greens. So whenever we're doing chipping around the green, we only chip on holes that she has a 7-iron or less into, because there's no point, because she's hitting 90% of her greens from 8-iron and in. So it's a waste of time. So we just basically figure out the places that we struggle the most. The same thing with you, what are the holes that you're usually chipping and pitching on? Those are the shots that you kind of want to practice a little bit more, because that'll just allow you to score a little bit better. So just a couple of closing thoughts here. I'm not sure what even time is. Oh, wow, time flies. So the big thing is just have a plan. for the season and what you'd like to improve. You know, I know this is obviously a tough year for us this year, but even with my tour pros, this is exactly what I'm like. Let's have a plan. Let's be organized. Let's know what we're going to do, and then we have to make the plan easy to follow. The hardest thing I see with a lot of people is that obviously they don't make a plan what they want to get better at, and it could be something super simple. It could be even behavior. You know, I want to try to manage my emotions. I don't want to be high and lows. You know, and then obviously make it easy to follow, and just keep the information simple. Make it easy. Like if you were telling, you know, your grandchild who's 7 or 8, you were telling them what you're working on, they would go, okay, yeah. You know, they would understand. If it's too complicated to explain to them, then it's probably too complicated and it's going to be hard for you to execute. So just wanted to share some of those thoughts with you today. Again, I do post some stuff on my Instagram, which is this, and I have a website, but we also are doing a lot more stuff on the YouTube channel. So there'll be content coming down there to sort of help you guys out and improve some different things. And once we get out and we're able to actually hit some, I'll do some more filming outside, which I think will be really helpful for you guys. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in. We had over, I think, close to 90 people there at one time. So thank you very much. And hope everybody's doing well. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody really soon. And some questions, I think, if we do.
Gareth, we had a couple questions, Gareth. One from Mike Hale.
Okay.
Mike Hale has a question. How can you tell if the problem is start line versus green reading?
So put a ruler down, go buy my ruler in the pro shop, and put the ruler down and check your start line. The other thing you could do if you're at home, just basically get 2 mugs and put the 2 mugs up here and put another ball maybe 4 or 5 feet down from there, and just see if you're able to hit them between the 2 mugs. If you're able to hit them between the 2 mugs, your start line's probably okay. So then it comes down to green reading after that. But whatever drill you're doing, you need to have feedback. If you don't have feedback, then you're not really practicing. You're just, you know, wasting time.
And Gareth, another question here from Tracy Houle. She says, do you tell the player what club should be in the bag? I think that's what Tracy's saying. Tracy, if you want to unmute yourself, you can clarify. But like how much do you tell the player what clubs it should be in the bag?
I think I do tell, like, if we're out hitting shots, I'll definitely say, hey, I don't like this club this week. I'd rather see you using this club. Whether they listen to me is another thing. But most of them are pretty good. Like if they see the difference and we can prove the difference using some of the technology that we use, then we're good to go. But yeah, no, quite often I'll say, I don't like this club for you. There has been players that have told me how much they love a certain club in their bag. And I've told their caddy that as soon as they have a really bad day with that club, just text me, because then I'm going to tell them how much I don't like that club, and we could probably get it out of their bag that day. But I think you're always trying not to mess with the player, and if they love a club, just let them play away.
Okay, thank you.
If there's other questions, just please unmute yourself or just raise your hand. We'll help to unmute you. So,
is there more, Simon? Did you say?
Hey, Gareth.
Yes. Hey, Brian.
Hi. I thought you would have come on and say that you spoke 6 languages now, but you verified that. But can you explain what your schedule is when you go to a tour event with the girls? Because last November, when I read your article in the Globe and Mail, I thought I would take a copy into Tyler on the Saturday morning. And I took it in, and Tyler said to me, well, turn around and you can give it to me yourself. Because Gareth was just walking through the door at the pro shop on Saturday morning, and the event in Naples was still on.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is that there's only so much that we can help the player with. And if I have to be there to hold their hand all day long, I think I'm doing a big disservice to the player. But I also think that having time away from a coach is really valuable, because they get to create their own ideas around what we had talked about. I think I never want people to really think about what I said. I want them to try to make it into their own words and their own ideas. So for me, Monday, usually get there Sunday night. Monday morning, I'm usually on the putting green by 6:30 or 7 a.m. and I'm there until about 7 p.m. that night. And I do that Monday, Tuesday, and then I do up to about 3:30 or 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. Thursday, I'll go follow the players and figure out if they're doing what we wanted them to do. Friday might be a little bit of that, or I try to catch a flight either Thursday night or Friday. But Thursday night is a very valuable time for the players because if they've had a bad day, there's a good opportunity for us to get together, figure it out, have a good Friday, make the cut, move on. If I take off without that opportunity, they're potentially maybe miss the cut. And, you know, I had one player this year, she had to go back to Q school and she missed the cut 6 times by 1 shot, you know, and I just started with her at the end of the year. You know, if you think about that, if I were able to do one event that she played well on the Friday, she would have kept her card and not had to go back to Q school. She managed to get her card back, but yeah, I think not being there on the weekend is probably good for my nerves as well.
Gareth, we have another question here from Tim and Christine Turnbull. How do we do our own strokes gained analysis?
Good question. So there are a number of different apps out there. Maybe I can put together a nice list for you, but there are a number of different apps out there that you can go in and you can actually create, let's say you're a 20 handicapper or a 10 handicapper or a scratch. You can say what you are and it'll give you kind of a strokes gained for that different player. And then you'll be able to see if you're plus or minus for that. But if you Google strokes gained, you'll probably be able to find something, but I'll find a couple of good apps for you. And maybe I can share that there in another post that you guys can look up. And if you're interested in collecting stats, I think it's a good way to do it.
If there's other questions, please type them into the chat or just unmute yourself and please feel free to ask Coach Gareth a question. It looks like that's it. I don't see any more chat questions, so I'll pass it back to if Catherine's still there, Catherine Pike-Walters.
Thank you, Simon. And again, just want to offer my thanks to Gareth. It was very enlightening, and I'm sure you've just scratched the surface on a few things. It was excellent. I also want to thank those who attended. Hope you found it of value. And if you keep your eyes on BendBits for future events, we'd be happy to host some other events. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again to Gareth and to Simon and Tara for helping us host this.
Great. Thank you very much, folks. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was good.
Hey, Simon, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
When is the golf course open, Simon?
It's a great question, Keith. What's the crystal ball say?
I have no idea.
I heard the rumor or a couple connections that Premier's supposed to announce something tomorrow, but
Okay, very good.
so that's what we're hoping for. But we've heard that previously too, so don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I was just curious. I saw he said nothing today, so anyhow, have a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.